There exists a faculty within the human mind that few dare to name. Not a thought, not a feeling, something deeper, a gaze that pierces through the veil of the ordinary, revealing layers of reality invisible to most. The Andalusian mystic Ibn Arabi called it basira, the inner vision, the eye behind the eye. This is not the eye that observes shapes and colors, but the one that witnesses the hidden architecture of existence itself. Tonight, we descend into the labyrinth of perception, into the shadowed corridors where truth hides beneath appearance. Imagine for a moment that everything you see is a lie, not in the crude sense of deception, but in the way a mirror lies, showing you a reflection, never the thing itself. Your mind interprets signals, constructs narratives, fills in gaps. What you call reality is a story your brain tells you, assembled from fragments of sensory data and colored by memory, desire, and fear. Most people live their entire lives inside this story, never questioning its validity. They see faces but miss the trembling beneath a smile. They hear words but ignore the silence that follows. They witness gestures but overlook the wound that animates them. Ibn Arabi understood this predicament. Born in 1165 in Andalusia, he spent his life mapping the invisible realms of consciousness. For him, the material world was only the surface, a shimmering veil stretched over infinite depths. Beneath every object, every person, every moment, lay a hidden dimension accessible only to those who cultivated what he called the eye of the heart. This was not metaphor. It was a precise description of a faculty dormant in most humans, waiting to be awakened through discipline, suffering, and surrender. The question that haunts us: what are we not seeing? In every conversation, in every glance, in every ordinary transaction, entire universes of meaning slip past unnoticed. Psychology has confirmed what mystics knew for centuries, that up to 90% of human communication occurs beneath the level of conscious awareness. The micro-expressions that flash across a face in less than a second. The subtle shifts in posture that betray internal conflict. The pauses pregnant with unspoken emotion. These signals are everywhere, but only those who have trained their perception can decode them. The mental tool Ibn Arabi describes is not a technique you learn in a workshop. It is a transformation of being. It requires that you dismantle everything you think you know about yourself and the world. Most people avoid this journey because it demands too much. The willingness to be wrong, to be lost, to endure the vertigo of uncertainty. Yet for those who persist, the reward is nothing less than a new way of existing in the world. Consider the architecture of human behavior. Every action you witness is the tip of an iceberg. Beneath the surface lie strata of causation, childhood wounds, unconscious desires, cultural conditioning, genetic predisposition. When someone lashes out in anger, the anger itself is merely a surface phenomenon. Beneath it might be fear. Beneath the fear, perhaps shame. Beneath the shame, a memory so painful it cannot be named. The mental tool allows you to perceive these layers, to trace the roots of behavior back through time and circumstance. But how does one cultivate such perception? Ibn Arabi's answer was paradoxical: through emptying rather than filling. The mind, cluttered with certainties, cannot see. It projects its assumptions onto reality, then mistakes the projection for truth. To develop basira, one must first become aware of one's own blindness. This requires brutal honesty, the willingness to examine your own motivations, to catch yourself in the act of self-deception, to recognize the stories you tell yourself as stories rather than facts. Imagine standing before a person you think you know, your partner, your parent, your oldest friend. Now imagine that everything you believe about them is wrong, not entirely, but enough to matter. The mental tool asks you to hold this possibility, to create space for the unknown even in the most familiar relationships. When you do this, something remarkable happens. The person before you becomes strange again, mysterious. You notice details that were always there but invisible. The way their voice changes when they speak about certain topics, the pattern of their defenses, the unspoken needs that drive their behavior. This is the first gift of the inner vision. It restores wonder to a world grown stale through familiarity. But it is also a burden. To see what others miss is to become isolated. Your observations threaten the comfortable fictions that hold relationships together. You notice when someone is lying not in their words, but in the discrepancy between their words and their energy. You sense the pain they're hiding, the resentment they won't acknowledge, the longing they've learned to suppress. And you must choose, to speak or to remain silent, knowing that either choice carries consequences. Ibn Arabi described the heart as having two eyes, reason and imagination. Western culture has privileged reason, treating imagination as mere fantasy. But for Ibn Arabi, imagination was not the opposite of truth. It was the bridge between the visible and invisible worlds. He spoke of a realm he called khayal, the world of images, where spiritual realities take form and physical forms reveal their spiritual essence. This intermediate realm is where true perception occurs, where the eye of the heart learns to see. Think of dreams. In sleep, your rational mind relaxes its grip, and other forms of knowing emerge. You dream of a house that is simultaneously your childhood home and a place you've never been. You encounter people who are both strangers and intimately familiar. The logic of dreams is not the logic of daylight reason, yet it reveals truths that reason cannot reach. Ibn Arabi treated waking life with the same interpretive sensitivity he brought to dreams. Every encounter, every image, every moment was symbolic, multi-layered, pregnant with meaning. The mental tool, then, is a kind of waking dream, the ability to perceive the symbolic dimension of ordinary reality. When someone speaks harshly, you hear not just their words but the wound that generates them. When someone offers help, you sense whether it comes from genuine care or the need to control. When someone smiles, you feel the quality of that smile, whether it reaches their eyes, whether it conceals or reveals, whether it invites or defends. This capacity terrifies most people. We construct elaborate defenses to avoid seeing too much. We distract ourselves with screens, substances, and constant activity. We cultivate numbness because the alternative, full perception, feels unbearable. To see clearly is to witness suffering everywhere, not just in obvious places, war zones and hospital wards, but in the quiet desperation of ordinary lives. The person serving you coffee, the stranger on the bus, the colleague in the next office, all of them carrying invisible burdens, wearing masks that hide their authentic selves. Yet Ibn Arabi insisted that this clear seeing was not just an ethical imperative, but a spiritual necessity. His central teaching, often misunderstood, was the doctrine of Wahdat al-Wujud, the unity of being. According to this view, there is ultimately only one reality, one existence. What we perceive as separate entities are actually manifestations of a single divine presence. The tree, the stone, the person, all are forms through which the one reality knows itself. If this sounds abstract, consider its psychological implications. When you truly see another person, you are seeing yourself, not in a narcissistic sense, but in the recognition that consciousness is fundamentally one. The suffering you witness in another is your suffering. The joy, your joy. The confusion, your confusion. This is why genuine perception is inseparable from compassion. You cannot truly see another and remain indifferent because the boundary between self and other has dissolved. But let us return to the practical dimension. How does the mental tool operate in daily life? It begins with attention, not the scattered surface attention we normally employ, but a quality of presence that is simultaneously relaxed and focused. When you enter a room, you notice not just who is there, but the emotional atmosphere. You sense the alliances and tensions, the unspoken agreements, the way power circulates through gesture and glance. In conversation, you listen not just to words, but to rhythm, tone, and what remains unsaid. You notice when someone changes the subject, and you ask yourself why. You observe your own reactions, the subtle tightening in your chest when certain topics arise, the impulse to interrupt or withdraw. The mental tool is self-reflexive. It watches the watcher, examining the lens through which you perceive. Over time, patterns emerge. You begin to recognize recurring dynamics, the way certain people always position themselves as victims, the way others deflect vulnerability with humor, the way anger often masks deeper emotions like grief or fear. These patterns are not judgments, but observations. The mental tool does not condemn, it simply sees. And in seeing, it creates the possibility of change. Ibn Arabi wrote extensively about the concept of tajalli, divine self-disclosure or theophany. For him, every moment was an act of revelation, the infinite expressing itself through finite forms. To wield the mental tool is to become sensitive to this constant self-disclosure, to recognize that nothing is merely what it appears to be. The angry customer is not just angry, but revealing something about the human condition. The beautiful sunset is not just beautiful, but a manifestation of the same creative force that animates your consciousness. This perspective transforms your relationship to time. Most people experience time as linear, a sequence of moments strung together like beads on a string. But with developed perception, each moment reveals its depth. A single conversation can unfold across multiple dimensions simultaneously. On the surface, you're discussing weekend plans. One layer down, you're negotiating boundaries. Deeper still, you're reenacting ancient patterns inherited from family and culture. The mental tool allows you to navigate these layers consciously rather than being blindly driven by them. Yet there are dangers. The first is pride. When you begin to see what others miss, the temptation is to feel superior. This is a trap that destroys perception. True basira is inseparable from humility, from the recognition that no matter how much you see, infinitely more remains hidden. Ibn Arabi cautioned his students against spiritual arrogance, reminding them that every insight is simultaneously a revelation of their own ignorance. The second danger is paralysis. To see too much can be overwhelming. Every interaction becomes a maze of meaning, every decision weighted with implications. Some who develop this faculty become unable to act, frozen by the complexity they perceive. The antidote is trust, not blind faith, but a cultivated confidence in your capacity to navigate uncertainty. You learn to tolerate not knowing, to act despite incomplete information, to revise your understanding as new evidence emerges. The third danger is isolation. As your perception deepens, you may find yourself increasingly alienated from ordinary social life. Conversations that once satisfied now feel hollow. Relationships based on shared illusions become unsustainable. You see through the games people play, and you can no longer pretend not to see. This can lead to a profound loneliness, a sense of being exiled from the comfortable fictions that bind communities together. Ibn Arabi himself experienced this isolation. His writings reveal a man who felt perpetually misunderstood, who could not fully share what he perceived with those around him. Yet he also spoke of a deeper companionship, the fellowship of those who see, scattered across time and space, united not by physical proximity, but by shared vision. To develop the mental tool is to join this invisible community, to become part of a lineage that stretches back centuries and forward into futures you will never witness. Let us examine a specific example. Consider the phenomenon of projection. Psychology teaches us that we often attribute to others qualities we cannot accept in ourselves. The traits we most vehemently condemn in others are frequently the ones we've repressed in ourselves. The mental tool allows you to catch this mechanism in action. When you feel a disproportionate emotional reaction to someone, intense dislike, irrational attraction, you can pause and ask, what is this person mirroring back to me? What aspect of myself am I encountering in this other? This self-inquiry is uncomfortable. It requires that you own the shadow parts of yourself, the petty, the cruel, the weak. But it is also liberating. When you stop projecting, you stop being controlled by unconscious mechanisms. You see others more clearly because you're not using them as screens for your own disowned qualities. And you see yourself more clearly, acknowledging the full spectrum of your humanity rather than clinging to an idealized self-image. Ibn Arabi described this process as the polishing of the mirror of the heart. The heart, in his cosmology, is not merely an organ or emotion, but the faculty of direct perception. When polished through spiritual practice, the heart becomes a clear mirror reflecting reality as it is. But when clouded by attachment, aversion, and ignorance, it distorts everything, showing you not the world, but your own psychological debris. The practices he recommended are demanding. Extended periods of solitude and silence, rigorous self-examination, the systematic dismantling of cherished beliefs. meditation on paradox and contradiction, cultivating awareness of death, not morbidly, but as a reminder of the preciousness and impermanence of each moment. These are not techniques for acquiring skills, but disciplines for transforming consciousness itself. In contemporary terms, we might understand this transformation through the lens of neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to rewire itself based on experience. When you consistently practice deep attention, you strengthen neural pathways associated with empathy, pattern recognition, and emotional regulation. You literally reshape your brain, enhancing your capacity for the kind of perception Ibn Arabi described. Modern neuroscience and ancient mysticism converge on a shared insight. The self is not fixed, but fluid, capable of radical transformation. Yet the mental tool is not reducible to brain states. There is something irreducible about consciousness, something that cannot be fully explained by neurotransmitters and synaptic firing patterns. Ibn Arabi would insist that what we're cultivating is not just a cognitive skill, but a spiritual awakening, the recognition of the divine nature of awareness itself. Whether you frame this in religious or secular terms, the experience is the same, a shift from identifying with the contents of consciousness to recognizing yourself as consciousness itself. This shift has practical implications. When you identify with your thoughts and emotions, you are buffeted by them, controlled by their fluctuations. When you recognize yourself as the awareness in which thoughts and emotions arise, you gain a measure of freedom. You can observe your anger without being consumed by it, notice your fear without being paralyzed, experience your joy without clinging to it. This is what Buddhists call equanimity, and what Sufis call submission. Not passivity, but the capacity to remain present and responsive regardless of circumstances. The mental tool, then, is ultimately a tool of liberation. It frees you from the tyranny of appearances, from the compulsion to believe your own stories, from the prison of habitual perception. But freedom always carries a price. In this case, the price is the loss of innocence, the comfortable certainty that the world is as it appears, that people mean what they say, that your own motivations are transparent to you. Can everyone develop this faculty? Ibn Arabi believed that basira is latent in every human being, but actualizing it requires specific conditions. Some are born with a natural sensitivity, an intuitive capacity for deep seeing. Others must cultivate it through disciplined practice. Still others will live and die without ever glimpsing what lies beneath the surface. This is not a matter of judgment, but of readiness. The mental tool reveals itself to those who are prepared to bear what it shows. Preparation involves several dimensions. First, psychological maturity, the capacity to tolerate ambiguity, complexity, and uncertainty. Second, emotional resilience, the strength to witness suffering without collapsing or defending. Third, intellectual humility, the willingness to question your own assumptions and revise your understanding. Fourth, spiritual openness, the recognition that reality exceeds the grasp of rational thought alone. These qualities are not prerequisites you must acquire before beginning, but capacities that develop through the practice itself. You learn to see by attempting to see, failing, trying again. Each failure teaches you something about the mechanisms of perception and self-deception. Each success, however partial, strengthens your capacity and deepens your understanding. Let us consider another practical application, the realm of intimate relationships. Nowhere is the mental tool more valuable or more challenging than in the context of love. When we fall in love, we see the beloved through a golden haze of projection and idealization. We attribute to them qualities they may not possess, overlook flaws that will later become intolerable, and construct elaborate fantasies about shared futures. This is not wrong. It is part of love's initiatory power, the force that draws us out of isolation into connection. But sustainable love requires a different kind of seeing. It demands that we perceive the beloved not as we wish them to be, but as they are, complete with contradictions, wounds, and limitations. This is where the mental tool becomes essential. It allows you to hold the paradox of seeing clearly while loving deeply. You notice your partner's defensiveness without condemning it. You recognize their pain without trying to fix it. You accept their separateness while honoring your connection. This mature perception is rare because it requires that you see yourself with the same clarity. You must acknowledge your own patterns of clinging and avoidance, your own wounds and limitations. You must take responsibility for your projections rather than blaming your partner for failing to match your fantasies. This mutual transparency, this willingness to be known and to know, creates the possibility of genuine intimacy rather than the merging of illusions. Ibn Arabi's concept of the perfect human, al-insan al-kamil, offers a model for this kind of maturity. The perfect human is not someone who has transcended limitation, but someone who has integrated all dimensions of human experience, the physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. Such a person sees clearly because they have learned to see themselves, recognizing in their own consciousness the full range of human possibility. They have encountered their own darkness and emerged not destroyed, but deepened, not hardened, but made tender. The journey towards such integration is lifelong. There is no arrival point, no final achievement. Each moment of clarity reveals new layers of complexity. Each answer generates new questions. This is why Ibn Arabi insisted that knowledge is ultimately infinite. There is always more to see, always deeper to go. The mental tool does not deliver you to certainty, but initiates you into an ever-deepening exploration of mystery. How does this exploration unfold in relation to the broader world, not just intimate others? When you develop the capacity to see beneath surfaces, you become aware of systemic patterns, the ways power operates through institutions, the invisible architecture of privilege and oppression, the mechanisms by which societies maintain order and suppress dissent. You notice who speaks and who remains silent, whose stories are told and whose are erased, which bodies move freely and which are constrained. This political dimension of perception is crucial. The mental tool is not merely for personal development, but for collective transformation. When you see clearly, you cannot remain complicit in systems that cause suffering. Yet you also recognize the complexity of these systems, that there are no simple villains or heroes, that everyone is caught in webs of causation that exceed individual will. This recognition does not lead to passivity, but to a more intelligent form of engagement, one that works with complexity, rather than trying to reduce it to slogans and binaries. Ibn Arabi lived during a period of tremendous political upheaval. The Christian Reconquista was consuming Andalusia, Islam was fragmenting into warring factions, cultures were colliding and hybridizing. Yet his response was not to retreat into sectarian certainty, but to insist on the unity underlying all diversity. He scandalized the orthodox by suggesting that God appears in every form of worship, that exclusive claims to truth are themselves a veil obscuring deeper recognition. This radical inclusivity was not relativism, the lazy notion that all views are equally valid. Rather, it was the fruit of perception so refined that it could recognize the same divine reality manifesting through apparently contradictory forms. The mental tool, when fully developed, does not collapse distinctions but sees their deeper unity. It perceives how opposites are necessary to each other, how conflict generates creativity, how diversity enriches the whole. In your own life, this might manifest as the capacity to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously without either collapsing them into false equivalence or hardening into dogmatic attachment to one view. You can understand the logic of positions you disagree with, empathize with people whose values contradict yours, recognize the partial truth in perspectives you find limited. This does not mean you abandon your own commitments, but that you hold them more lightly, more provisionally, with awareness that your view is always partial. The mental tool thus becomes a practice of epistemic humility. The recognition that however much you see, you are still seeing through filters shaped by your particular history, culture, and conditioning. Ibn Arabi expressed this through the metaphor of colored glass. The light passing through is one, but it takes on the color of whatever it passes through. Similarly, divine reality is one, but it appears different to different observers depending on the particularity of their perception. This brings us to a crucial question. If perception is always conditioned, if we always see through filters, how can we speak of seeing clearly at all? Is not the promise of the mental tool to see what others miss itself a kind of arrogance, a claim to privileged access to truth? Ibn Arabi's answer is subtle. Yes, all perception is conditioned. No human can escape the limitations of their embodied, situated perspective. But there are degrees of clarity. Some filters are more transparent than others. Some forms of conditioning are more self-aware than others. The mental tool does not grant you access to absolute, unconditioned truth. Rather, it makes you aware of your own conditioning, allows you to compensate for its distortions, and gives you the flexibility to shift between perspectives rather than being imprisoned in one. Think of it this way. A fish does not know it is in water until it is pulled onto dry land. Most people are like fish, swimming in the medium of their conditioning without recognizing it as such. They mistake their particular cultural assumptions for universal truths, their personal preferences for objective values, their historical moment for the end of history. The mental tool is what allows you to recognize the water, to see the usually invisible frameworks that structure your perception. Once you see the water, you cannot unsee it. This is both liberation and exile. Liberation because you are no longer completely controlled by conditioning you don't recognize. Exile because you can no longer fully inhabit the unquestioned certainties that give others their sense of belonging. You become a stranger in your own culture, alienated from the very systems that shaped you. Ibn Arabi knew this alienation intimately. He spent much of his life wandering from Andalusia to North Africa to the Middle East, never fully at home anywhere. Yet this homelessness was also a kind of freedom. Unbound by any single cultural context, he could draw on the full range of Islamic mystical traditions, weaving them into a synthesis that transcended sectarian boundaries. His exile became the condition for a more expansive vision. The same pattern repeats in individual development. You must leave home, psychologically if not physically, to see it clearly. You must risk the loss of belonging to gain authentic selfhood. This is the hero's journey, the pattern Joseph Campbell identified as running through mythologies worldwide. Departure, initiation, return. You leave the familiar, undergo transformation through trials, and return with new understanding, though the return is never simple because you have changed in ways that make full reintegration impossible. What do you bring back from the journey? Not answers ultimately, but questions. The mental tool does not solve the mystery of existence, but deepens it. The more you see, the more you realize how much remains hidden. Yet this expansion of awareness is itself the reward. To live in constant wonder, in perpetual discovery, in ongoing transformation, this is what it means to be fully alive rather than merely existing. Let us return once more to the immediacy of experience. You are reading these words. But what is happening beneath the surface of this act? Your eyes scan symbols on a screen. Your brain translates those symbols into meaning. But where does meaning arise? In the text itself, in your interpretation, in the space between. Notice how even this simple act, reading, involves multiple layers. There is the content of what is being said. There is your emotional response to that content. There is your judgment of that response. There is your awareness of being aware. The mental tool invites you to attend to all these layers simultaneously, not to master them or control them, but simply to witness how consciousness operates. In this witnessing, something shifts. The ordinary becomes extraordinary. The familiar becomes strange. You realize that you have never actually looked at anything before, not really. You have been sleepwalking through life, operating on autopilot, seeing only what you expected to see. To wake up is to experience vertigo. Everything you took for granted reveals itself as contingent, constructed, provisional. The self you thought was solid turns out to be a process, a fluid pattern of habits and identifications constantly changing. The world you thought was objective reveals itself as inseparable from your perception of it. This can be terrifying. It can also be exhilarating. Ibn Arabi spoke of fana, annihilation or passing away, followed by baqa, remaining or subsistence. First, the constructed self must die. All the stories you tell about who you are, all your roles and identities and achievements, these must be released. Only then can you discover what remains when all constructions fall away. What remains is not nothing but the sheer fact of awareness itself, luminous and empty, prior to all content. This is the deepest level of the mental tool, not just seeing through appearances, but recognizing the nature of the seer itself. Who is it that sees? When you turn attention back on itself, what do you find? Not an object, not a thing, but a mysterious presence that cannot be grasped or defined. Ibn Arabi called this the station of no station, a place of being that is no particular place. We have traveled far from where we began, yet in another sense we have not moved at all. Everything discussed here was present in the opening moments. The possibility of seeing what others miss, the faculty dormant within you, waiting to be activated. The question is whether you will respond to the invitation, whether you will risk the comfortable prison of ordinary perception for the demanding freedom of clear sight. There are no guarantees. You may practice for years and see no dramatic results. The transformation is often so gradual that you don't notice it happening. Then one day you realize that you no longer react to situations the way you once did. You notice subtleties that previously escaped you. You feel more connected to others, even as you're more aware of difference. You inhabit uncertainty with less anxiety. These small shifts accumulate into a different way of being. Or perhaps the transformation comes suddenly, a moment of crisis that shatters your usual defenses and forces you to see what you've been avoiding. Illness, loss, betrayal, failure, any of these can become initiations into deeper perception if you let them. The key is not to close down in the face of pain, but to remain open, to let the experience break you open rather than harden you. Ibn Arabi lost his homeland, watched his culture decline, experienced the death of teachers and loved ones. Yet he transformed these losses into wisdom, suffering into compassion, exile into spiritual freedom. His life testifies to the possibility of alchemical transformation, lead into gold, pain into perception, darkness into light. This is the promise of the mental tool. Not that life becomes easier, but that you become more capable of meeting it fully. You develop the strength to bear what is, the flexibility to adapt to change, the wisdom to discern what matters. You see the hidden dimensions of existence not as escape from the material world, but as deepening your engagement with it. Every face becomes a universe to explore, every conversation a mystery to contemplate, every moment an opportunity for fresh perception. This is not a metaphor, but a description of direct experience available to anyone willing to cultivate the necessary conditions. The world is not lacking in wonder, we are lacking in attention. So begin where you are. Notice what you notice. Question what you assume. Attend to the space between thoughts, the silence between words, the pause between breaths. These gaps are doorways into deeper dimensions. You need no special equipment, no exotic practices, no guru's blessing. You need only curiosity, courage, and persistence. The mental tool that Ibn Arabi describes is not his invention, but his articulation of capacities inherent in human consciousness. He mapped the territory so that others might navigate it. But the journey itself is yours alone. No one can see for you. No one can do your work of awakening. You must enter the labyrinth yourself. Trust the darkness and discover what awaits in the depths. What you will find there cannot be told, not because it is secret, but because it is beyond words. Language can point toward it, gesture at it, create conditions for its recognition. But the experience itself transcends description. It must be lived, embodied, integrated. This is why all the great mystical traditions emphasize practice over belief, transformation over information, being over knowing. And yet the paradox remains, you cannot will this transformation. The mental tool is not something you acquire through effort alone. It is more accurate to say that it acquires you, that you become available to it by releasing the obstacles that prevent its natural emergence. These obstacles are familiar: fear, pride, distraction, attachment to certainty. They are not enemies to be vanquished, but patterns to be understood and gradually released. In the end, the mental tool that makes you see what no one notices is simply this: complete presence. Presence to yourself, to others, to the world, to the mystery that animates everything. When you are truly present, perception deepens spontaneously. The veils part not because you tear them down, but because presence itself dissolves them. This is what Ibn Arabi spent his life teaching, in thousands of pages of dense mystical philosophy and in moments of direct transmission to his students. The teaching is simple but demanding. Be here, be awake, be aware. Let go of what you think you know. Open to what is actually happening. Trust the intelligence of awareness itself. The journey has no end. There is always more to see, always deeper to go. But there is also something complete in every moment of clear perception, something that needs nothing added to it. The hunger for understanding and the satisfaction of presence coexist, not as contradiction, but as complementary aspects of the same reality. As these words come to a close, notice what remains. The silence behind the words, the awareness that has been here all along, the presence that witnesses everything without being touched by it. That is the mental tool in its essence. Not a thing you possess, but what you are beneath all possession. Not something you develop, but what emerges when development ceases. Ibn Arabi's gift to us is not a doctrine, but a possibility. The possibility of living awake in a world where most sleep, of seeing clearly in a culture of distraction, of knowing ourselves and through that knowing, recognizing the divine nature of all existence. Whether you frame this in spiritual or psychological terms matters less than whether you respond to the call. The call is always present, sounding in the depths of your being. It is the voice of your own unrealized potential, the whisper of consciousness inviting itself to greater clarity. Most ignore it, drowning it out with noise and busyness. But some listen, some stop, turn inward, and begin the journey of transformation. If you have read this far, you are likely among those who hear the call. The question now is what you will do with it. Will you return to the familiar patterns of distraction and avoidance? Or will you accept the invitation to see more deeply, to live more fully, to become more truly yourself? There is no right answer, no moral imperative. This is not about should or ought. It is simply about what is possible for you, in this moment, in this life. The mental tool waits, patient and eternal, for those ready to receive it. It does not force itself on anyone. It only offers again and again the possibility of awakening. And so we end where we began, in darkness, in silence, in the space between knowing and unknowing. But if something has shifted, if even a small opening has occurred, then these words have served their purpose. The rest is up to you. The labyrinth awaits, and the treasure at its center is nothing less than your own true nature, seen clearly for the first time. Step forward. The journey begins with a single act of attention, and that attention, sustained and deepened over time, becomes the mental tool that transforms not just what you see, but who you are in the seeing. This is Ibn Arabi's legacy, not a set of beliefs to adopt, but a way of being to embody. May you find the courage to walk this path, wherever it leads.